For those of you who have been here for the last few weeks, I know you'll be very happy to know that I have a prepared statement to deliver. A lot of new stuff. But for those of you who haven't been here, why, it would be even more joy. All right, let me begin one more time. As I did in January, I pledged to work cooperatively and professionally with Governor Rauner. That was part of my remarks at the time of the legislative inauguration. I repeated that consistently, and I'll say it today and as we go into the future. The number one problem facing the state of Illinois is the budget deficit. I don't feel that you can just cut your way out of the budget deficit. As a matter of fact, the governor's cuts-only budget severely slashes medical services for the elderly, the disabled, and for struggling families. I feel there has to be a balanced approach, some cuts and some new revenue. The spending plan that was adopted by the legislature contained several reductions in spending. It also provided that there was a bill passed by the legislature that would cut Medicaid spending by $400 million. That spending plan helps and protects middle-class families by supporting local schools, local police, and local road programs. The governor's advocacy of non-budget issues goes right to the core beliefs of many Democrats and many Republicans, because his advocacy of those ideas reduces wages for Illinoisans and brings down the standard of living for middle-class families. In addition, his ideas would force injured workers to welfare and to the emergency room. I've argued consistently that the governor's advocacy of these non-budget issues puts the governor in a position where he is functioning in the extreme at a time when all of us should be functioning in moderation, and all of us should be reasonable so that we can work on the number one problem facing the state of Illinois, which is the budget deficit. Let me make a few more points. Concerning the governor's advocacy of non-budget issues, I've argued that to the extent he does that, he's functioning in the extreme, not in the moderation that will be needed to solve the problem of the budget deficit. However, despite that, we've attempted to meet the governor halfway. One of the governor's non-budget issues is changes in workers' compensation. The House has passed to the Senate a bill that does changes in workers' compensation, and there could be further amendments and further changes to that bill. Number two, the governor wants to privatize the operations of DECIO, the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. The House has passed a bill that would privatize the operations of DECIO. It's consistent with the governor's request, and it's been negotiated with the governor. Lastly, the governor is requesting a freeze in property taxes. The House has called that bill 5 times. There have been 5 opportunities to pass a bill that would freeze property taxes pursuant to the governor's suggestion. On all 5 occasions, the Republicans have declined to support that bill. There are over 40 Democrats consistently supporting the bill that would freeze property taxes. The bill requires 71. And so we're well within reach, and if there was Republican cooperation, the bill would already be in the Senate, halfway toward passage to the governor. Lastly, there's a committee of the whole underway right now. The purpose of the committee of the whole is to show the disaster that would occur if there's a government shutdown. And we're very regretful that the Rauner administration has decided not to participate in the deliberations of this committee of the whole. All of the governor's agency directors were invited to attend today's committee of the whole, and to my knowledge, none of them have appeared, none of them are participating. You're probably also familiar with a proposal that will be offered tomorrow, and it would provide for what we call an essential services budget. The background here is that the legislature passed a spending plan. The governor declined to take advantage of the powers given to him by the Constitution, where he could have used his line item veto, his reduction veto, to fashion that spending plan to his liking. Just today, the governor used his powers under the Constitution, I believe, to line item the capital bill. So he used these powers on the capital bill, but he declined to use them all through the remainder of the budget. Therefore, tomorrow, there'll be no budget, and tomorrow we will offer what we call an essential services budget. It would be a one-month budget. It would appropriate a little over $2 billion for essential services, and it would constitute about 2 to 3% of the total appropriation for a 12-month budget. The purpose here is to provide that we would avoid the government shutdown. So there were plenty of opportunities to avoid the government shutdown. The governor could have used his powers under the Constitution to refashion that budget. They have an opportunity to vote on this essential services budget tomorrow, which would keep the government open, keep the government functioning. Do you have a question?
No, sir.
Good. I'm available.
I got
Speaker.
Go
one.
ahead.
Nothing to do with the budget. This has to do with the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library and Museum. David Borland was just hired as the manager of exhibits. He has no qualifications that were put forth in the written job description issued in 2014 for the director of exhibits. Catherine Parker, the director of guest services, is a convicted felon and formerly disbarred attorney. Eileen Makovich, the executive director of the institution, has no experience managing a museum prior to her getting this job. What do you say to folks who say, this is a patronage dump? I mean, these are folks that have no experience in their field of expertise that they're called for to do with taxpayer money.
That'd be a reason for the governor to sign the bill, which I passed out of the House. Senate's approved the bill. It would reconstitute the Lincoln Library, and it would set it up as a separate entity. The governor would make all of the appointments subject to confirmation by the Senate, which would put the governor in a position to completely reshape what happens at the Lincoln Museum and Library. If your complaint is about the operations at the Lincoln Library, I agree. That's why I sponsored the bill in the first place.
Is it a coincidence? Is it a coincidence? Is it a coincidence that this bill passed 24 hours prior to Mr. Borland getting his position? Is that a coincidence?
I think it passed earlier
Well,
than that.
it was in the contract. Is that a coincidence?
I wouldn't have the slightest idea. I believe the bill passed weeks ago. I think it passed before the end of May.
It was not sent to the governor's office. It was called for recall by.
Okay, all right. The bill has been passed. The bill would reconstitute the Lincoln Library. It would reconstitute the Historic Preservation Agency. It would put the governor in a position to reshape both institutions.
Do you trust the governor to do that, given what he's doing with the Illinois State Museum?
Well, all of those appointments are subject to confirmation by the Senate. So that's the opportunity for people to do a vetting process.
Speaker, why no revenue estimates?
The last time we did a one-month budget, a basic services budget, you had the governor doing. What makes you think that the governor will go along with this?
I would simply hope that the governor would see the wisdom of continuing to keep the government functioning. He had that opportunity when the spending plan was in front of him. He declined to use his powers under the Constitution to reshape the spending plan that we put on his desk. This is another opportunity to not shut down the government, to keep the essential services of the government flowing. That's the purpose here. Let me repeat that, as I've said, the most serious problem facing the state of Illinois is the budget deficit. In order to solve that problem, people cannot be functioning in the extreme. They have to function in moderation. They have to be reasonable. This is a reasonable proposal. This is a reasonable proposal. 1 month budget, 2 to 3% of the total appropriation, a little over $2 billion. Everybody in the legislature should vote for this bill, and the governor should sign it.
Speaker, follow up on the extreme.
Slow down, so we'll take all your questions, you have to shout.
Representative
Extreme common
Harris,
sense.
Okay.
Speaker Representative Harris said today that no revenue estimates have been pushed through Revenue and Finance yet. Can you address that?
I would disagree. You know, the Revenue Committee has considered revenue estimates from the Bureau of the Budget and from the Commission on Economic Forecasting. We've had several discussions about revenue estimates.
Mr. Speaker, are there enough votes in the House and the Senate to overcome a Rauner veto of this temporary budget?
Yeah, of the temporary, the essential.
To pass it and to overcome. I mean, do you have the votes?
We'll find out tomorrow when we call the bill. I was advised before I came down here that there were a couple of Republicans in the House who were saying they plan to vote for an essential services budget. So I'd be anxious to learn if they're prepared to stand up to the governor if he's recommending differently.
It is the teacher 40-day delay that,
Well, I think it's moot, because I've been advised that the Chicago school system will make their payment before the end of the business day today. So the matter is moot.
Speaker,
I've simply been advised by reliable sources that,
what did Ron Emanuel say to you?
it wasn't Ram. I've been advised by reliable sources they have cash on hand, and they'll be in a position to make the payment before the end of the business day today,
The full payment?
the full payment.
Well, can they then open the schools, though? That's been the,
Well, that's to be addressed as we move ahead.
but after they make the payment, there was that cash flow analysis that indicated they would not be able to open the schools.
Yeah, and I'm not familiar with that. I'm not in a position to speak to that. I'm responding to a question about an earlier bill, which I think is now moot.
And then are you able to, can you tell us, will there be the money there
I-
in time to open the schools?
I don't know. I don't
Bring
know.
the teachers in or not?
I don't know.
Is there an alternative proposal to provide some aid to CPS pensions in some other form that is not simply a delay vote?
Well, you spend a lot of time here in the Capitol building, and so I'm sure you've heard of a lot of conversations which are designed to be helpful to the Chicago school system. I'm not prepared to speak to them at this time.
What part of the extreme doesn't the governor understand? I asked him this morning whether he still plans to change hearts and minds on his reform agenda, and I reiterated that you would call his proposals extreme, and he
Yeah.
said they may be extreme common sense. He said that the bulk of the electorate is with him and that they are contacting legislators. Do you believe that to be true, and have you had any contact from?
I would simply say again that to the extent that the governor is advocating non-budget issues, lower wages and lower the standard of living of middle-class families, and force workers to welfare and to the emergency room, I view that as functioning in the extreme. I don't view that as functioning in moderation, which is going to be needed to solve the problem of the budget deficit.
Speaker, the
Speaker,
temporary
could you outline
budget.
some of the essential services that would be paid for in this one-month budget?
We could give you this document.
That'd be great.
Okay. Yeah.
Speaker, you say it's 2 to 3% of what budget? Whose budget?
It would be the normal appropriation, either
So
for the
36
prior budget or for the next budget, either one. And that's just an estimate, it's just an
Well,
estimate.
an estimate of the 36 billion or the 32 billion, an estimate?
As I said, it's an estimate. Work with the current budget or the next budget, whatever you wish. It's just an estimate.
Mr. Speaker,
The governor's aides were tweeting that they were kicked off of the House floor. Is that true?
One of the employees of the governor's office was denied access to the floor because this is a committee hearing. And in this committee and in all committees, the House has over 30 committees, liaisons from the governor's office are not permitted to circulate among the members where the members are sitting. They can ask members to leave the floor, leave the committee, and they can consult with them outside of the area where the members are sitting. This is just an established rule.
Mr. Speaker, with the shutdown potentially beginning tomorrow and state workers still going to work, it was being discussed upstairs, what happens on July 15th if there isn't a budget and the state workers are looking for their paychecks?
Well, as you know, that's become a legal issue, a difference of legal opinion between the governor's office and the office of the attorney general. I don't plan to offer a legal opinion. It's going to be a while before there's a final resolution, but it's a legal matter, legal difference of opinion between the governor's office and the office
If
of
that
the attorney
becomes an
general.
entrenched legal battle, will workers be told not to come to work because we don't know if we can pay you?
That's a decision for the governor and the other hiring officers.
Well, if the governor is correct, then the emergency budget is not needed in order for employees to be paid.
The emergency budget does more than provide authority to pay salaries. You know, it's also concerned with grants to not-for-profit social service agencies. It runs right across the board of what is determined to be essential services.
Do you
Speaker,
and
part of
Governor
the,
have a plan
veto
to meet
today?
again soon?
Well, you know, we met yesterday, and as part of that meeting was that we agreed that on a regular basis that we would meet and exchange ideas.
What's regular, like
It's in the eye of the beholder.
yeah, that's why I'm
Right.
asking. In your eye, what would be regular?
The governor has 5 bills that he's introduced, and he wants votes on those 5 bills. Why not just take the votes?
Well, because certain of those bills go right to the core beliefs of both Democrats and Republicans, and some of those bills would significantly reduce wages and the standard of living for middle-class families. It would force workers to the welfare rolls and to the emergency room.
But I'm not asking why not pass them, I'm just asking why not vote on them.
Well, and as I said earlier, you know, in an effort to be cooperative with the governor, my initial pledge in January was to be cooperative and professional. I'm going to continue to do that. We've attempted to meet him halfway. The House has passed a bill which changes workers' compensation. We did that just about the same time that the Workers' Compensation Commission, which is under the jurisdiction of the governor, issued a report which states that there have been significant reductions in the cost of workers' compensation over the last 3 to 4 years. Now, this is a report that came out of an agency under the control of the governor, and it's available to all of you to read and to understand. But what it says is that the changes that we did to workers' compensation in 2011 are working. The intent in 2011 was to bring down the cost of workers' compensation. And this report, which came from the governor's agency, substantiates our claim that the 2011 changes are having an effect to bring down the cost of workers' compensation.
Speaker,
How
can you
is
tell
this
me about
any different
these?
than previous times when Illinois has been on the precipice of a shutdown
Yeah.
or hasn't passed a budget on time, or how is it the same?
Yeah, well, a big difference is that the House and the Senate will be in continuous session. So we are at work. We are addressing the problems brought before the legislature by everyone in Illinois. That's a big difference. We are in continuous session. We're here today. We'll be here tomorrow. We'll be here on Tuesday, January 7th. Not January 7th. Yeah, I wish it was January, right? Right. July 7th.
Wait,
Go ahead.
did you have more? I'm sorry.
I thought it was a good
Seems like
answer.
There's a lot that's different though, this time around.
Well, what is it? Tell us.
Well, I don't know, a new governor certainly brings differences, right? Especially a governor with a whole lot of money, that, maybe that makes a difference, I don't know.
Yeah.
If it's not different, why should anybody have any hopes? I mean, we're sitting here in a quagmire, and you just said that, you know, you were asked directly how you felt about the pension bill for Chicago Public Schools, and you said, I'm not prepared to speak at this moment. There's a lot of kids at stake there, there's a lot of parents at stake there, there's a lot of employees at stake there. And folks are sitting here thinking that, oh, you guys are just playing poker here in Springfield.
Well, that might be your view, but as I told you, my expectation is that that pension payment will be made. Mike Flannery made a valid point. There are open questions going forward in terms of paying the bills at the Chicago Board of Education.
Well, where do
I'm
you
from,
stand?
you know,
Where
I'm,
do you stand?
well,
Because
I'm from Chicago, and I'm vitally interested in the Chicago school system. And I think it's extremely important that the system not only open on time in September, but it continue through the fiscal year to provide educational services to children that attend those schools. So that's why we're in continuous session. That's why we're here to work on the problems.
But no one would disagree with that. Where do you stand long-term in making sure the Chicago public schools are stable?
Yeah, I think I've answered that question.
Speaker, Northern Illinois University points out 10,000 people have left from 2013 to 2014. They also highlight Rockford and other border towns are having a decline in population. How can we stem that?
Well, the first thing that could help would be a rebound in the national economy. That'd be the first thing that could help. And there's been some improvement, but there could be more improvement. That'd be a real good start. The next really good thing that we could do for all of Illinois would be to address the number one problem facing the state of Illinois, which is the budget deficit. So when people wish to complain about the government of the state of Illinois, the first thing they talk about is the budget deficit. And my point is, let's get to work on the number one problem facing the state of Illinois, the budget deficit. Let's not function in the extreme.
But NIU
Let's function
says-
in
the NIU
moderation.
says jobs
Let's
and
make
property
sure that
taxes.
everybody is reasonable through all of this, functioning in moderation.
Is it just
We
the
can get
budget
the
or are there
job
other
done.
things that the state
Yeah.
can do?
Could you share your thoughts on the latest pension proposal that the governor is now talking about, the combination of the Cullerton consideration and some changes for CPS? Have you all talked about that in your meeting yesterday, or any new thoughts?
That's one of the conversations that you would hear around the Capitol building. It's a conversation. There's a lot of interesting ideas in there, but, I think there's more work to be done on that.
If the governor makes a
Do you envision
case-
this being a summer where you continue to pass these stopgap one-month budgets? Given how deep the divide is, this is kind of gonna be hobbling along for the next several months?
Well, there's no need for that. Again, if people recognize what the number one problem is, the budget deficit, not non-budget issues, but the budget deficit. If people are reasonable, if they function in moderation, the problem can be solved. The problem can be solved. But if people choose to function in the extreme and to advance extreme non-budget issues, it's going to make it more difficult.
What does
If
the
it- if the
governor say
governor
when you say
choice-
that? When you tell him that in these meetings? What is his response to that? Or, I mean, have you even talked about revenue at all, or the budget, or has it just been focused on the turnaround and you're saying?
Maybe you could help. Maybe you could have a conversation with him and tell me what he's got to say.
If the governor
Doesn't
makes a
annex-
case for paying employees and makes an agreement with the Attorney General and the Controller, would you support going ahead and paying state employees without a budget in place?
I would recommend that we adopt the essential services budget. That's what I would recommend. Now, the legislature passed a spending plan to the governor, which would have avoided all of these questions related to a government shutdown.
But that didn't happen. So
That didn't happen. So the next viable option would be to pass this essential services budget. And that would provide spending authority to continue with these essential services.
But if he doesn't agree with that, would you support paying the employees without?
Well, I think you're taking us into this legal question, and I don't plan to offer my legal opinion
No,
on
I'm not
that.
asking a legal question. He's
No, I
making a
think,
case
but,
that he can.
yeah, but I know what you're saying, but I think you're going right to the legal question. That's what's going to be before a court.
Mr. Speaker, you keep using the word extreme to
Correct.
brand the governor and
Yeah.
his actions as it relates to the budget, but we're in an extreme deficit here. Why wouldn't that require an extreme response?
We're
Has
in a-
moderation not solved the problem for years?
I'm just giving you my opinion. I've been through these things before. I've worked through these things before with other governors. And my experience is that if you've got a big problem like this and you're serious about solving the big problem, which is the budget deficit, then you function in moderation. You don't go to extreme. Just don't go there because it doesn't help.
Mr.
Speak
Speaker,
through this
Just
before.
excuse me a second, right back here.
Thank you. Why, is it just a technicality that you can't submit the emergency budget till tomorrow? Why not do it today? Did you have to wait for the time to run out, or?
No, there's nothing like that. It's just in terms of scheduling. We had scheduled a committee of the whole, which is going to last today and tomorrow. And then we'll call a bill that would provide an essential services budget. And they'll do the same thing in the
If you
Senate.
know it's gonna come to that, why not just do that?
Well, as I said, it was a matter of scheduling.
Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, the governor today said you were the one not supporting the CPS bill. Lang earlier pointed to the governor. What's going on?
Well, look, there's one of the problems that exists in the Capitol building in terms of solving the biggest problem facing the state, which is the budget deficit. My pledge is to act cooperatively and professionally, and I'm not going to get into name calling and finger pointing. That doesn't help anything. What everybody ought to do is resolve to be reasonable, resolve to work in moderation, resolve not to go to the extreme on things. Then we can make some progress.
Mr. Speaker.
But I'm not going to get into he said, I said,
Can
you
you
said.
address the-
You've consistently said that if everybody's reasonable, there's no reason
Yeah.
we can't solve these problems. It's June 30th, we still haven't solved these problems. Apparently, people aren't being reasonable so far. What reason do you believe that they will be now?
Number one, you talked about June. We're in continuous session. The House will be in continuous session. We will be at work, available to work on these problems. We're here today, we're here tomorrow, we're here next Tuesday, okay? So I wouldn't focus on the dates or the time. The House is in continuous session. Key issue, what are we going to do about the budget deficit? Even Governor Rauner acknowledges that the continuing budget deficit of the state is a big, big, big problem. Even he acknowledges that. The difference I have with him is that he's attempting to leverage that with these non-budget issues. And in my judgment, that takes him to the extreme.
Speaker,
Mr.
can you address-
Speaker,
can you address
when
the-
do we reach the crunch? We've removed now the August 10th, the school aid payment. When's the real crunch from the point of view of the people in the 13th ward, for example?
There's no crunch in the 13th ward, you know that.
All right, thanks, everybody.
Everybody's happy in the 13th ward. It's a garden out there.
Speaker, can
So
you
when
address
does the
these
absence
line
of a
items?
state budget, when does the absence of a state budget, Mr. Speaker, make things
1991, when Edgar became the governor,
Speaker, can you
I
address?
even survived Blagojevich. Rich, I'm sorry, but as I said earlier, we've come halfway on pretty serious issues. I have personal conversations with the governor. John Cullerton has personal conversations with the governor. We were both involved in the 2011 changes in workers' compensation. We've advanced this bill from the House to the Senate. It does changes that could be done, should be done in workers' compensation. We're not going to go to the causation issue the way the governor wants to go to the causation issue because it hurts injured workers, forces injured workers to welfare or to the emergency room. There is the difference in core beliefs.
Why not have a vote
The
on that?
governor is interested in bringing down bottom line costs.
But
We're
Speaker,
not
why
against that, but we're not going to send injured workers to the emergency room and to welfare just to bring down the bottom line cost.
Why not have
It's a
a vote
fundamental
on-
difference of opinion.
Why
And
not
that's
have a vote?
why everybody should function in moderation, including you.
Start.
1991.
That's blurry, that's blurry.
He survived.
I know.